Say $45 for a little.
Yeah, they are.
They're matching their horse festivals. They thought they were doing it, but they're not doing festivals.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a 30-40 crowd. And you can see what the original looked like, as their Harvey Mouter had an original there.
I saved this in for.
No, this is here. That's what the original looked like before I went on.
Why, we're both in the ring.
I thought once you had
Yeah, I made the stock check. The only thing I didn't do, I didn't glue it.
Yeah, they made a mistake.
I fell up to Henry. Tom McCool, Henryville doesn't do it. In fact, you put the red one side on too. I didn't put that on. But the rest of the work I did.
Now they wanted to see these plates that are in here.
Yeah, that's about the nicest job I ever did.
I think that's also nice, but we don't know.
Well, I don't know. If it's part, is it part of the
No,
matter?
it's not
Those-
done. Oh, it's from.
My wife always said, is she around? Be careful what it
You
says.
better whisper. You better whisper.
She said if I rubbed her as much as I rubbed those stocks, we'd have a lot more kids.
All there.
First of all, we have a museum committee, and Gladys Zegler has been functioning in that capacity. But because she's doing the oak leaves now, she has opted to resign from that position. And here's her letter. Because of increased responsibilities, including those within the Historical Society, I hereby tender my resignation as chairman of the museum committee. Now, I've already spoken with John O'Brien, and he's agreed to serve on that committee, but we need 2 other people. And I'd like you all to think about this. If anyone feels they'd like to join that committee, I'll be happy to entertain their offer. The other thing is, in March, we're going to have to select a nominating committee, which I don't have anything to do with. The board will elect.
Match my order and my son. They're all stupid. I didn't get it.
And you brought some hairdresser. Wasn't that nice? That was nice. We were hoping she'd be here.
I don't want to drag it out. The winner of the Afghan was a Kathy O'Shaughnessy from Long Valley. I don't believe she's here. Then I think we'll get right into the program. And Monica, will you come in and introduce Mr. Ryman? There will be some other business after the lunch, and I hope you'll all stay and participate. Thank you. Monica?
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to introduce FranklinGRymon, who's a member of our Historical Society.
Get that close away first.
Get the club away first. Okay, now I'd like to introduce the program. Mr. Ryman, Franklin lives in Washington, New Jersey, and he has been collecting guns for more than 60 years. He's a life member of the NRA, and he's going to share his knowledge and expertise about guns with us today. He's going to illustrate guns from the various periods of American history using not only his own, but the collection that was given to us by the Harry Mouter estate. He has even designed his own converted guns, designed his own guns, and accepts historic guns as for the society. I'd like to introduce Frank.
Thank you, Cass. Well, if you don't mind, I'll sit down. Ladies and gentlemen, I was asked to speak about the Harvey Mouter collection and the guns of history and what part they played in the wars America fought. I will talk about the evolution of firearms using some of my guns and some of the Harvey Muller collection and what wars they were fought in or used in. I read an article entitled United States Born in Gunsmoke. That couldn't be more true. But we know that the old world could not say that because they were born long before the evolution of the invention of gunpowder. Now the caveman had his club, next came the spear and the sword, used by the men in armor. The Romans were experts with this. Then we had the bow and the arrow and the crossbows. And do you know that arrows were shot from guns? And especially on ships, they used a cannon that shot arrows, and they shot fire arrows. And the idea was to shoot the fire arrows to burn the enemy sails. There was an old saying, England built their guns for war. Germany built theirs for hunting. And America built theirs for target shooting. Ladies, I hope you don't get too bored with my talk. Do you know that ladies are trained by the NRA to compete in the Olympics, and they do all right? They make very high scores. The United States have had many crack shots, both men and women. You remember Annie Oakley? And I remember a man by the name of Cox. It seems that in the old days, or ways back, the gun companies all hired men, expert shots, to go around the country and shoot in exhibits to sell their guns. Well, this man Cox was back at Hampton, George Charlestown, in Hackett's Orchard. He put on an exhibit, and he was a good shot with Remington. Remington hired him. He would throw washers in the air with a .22 rifle. He would shoot him. He said, "Now I'll hit this one to the right," and it would buzz off to the right. He'd shoot the other to the left and buzz off to the left. And whichever direction he said. Now he said, I'll put one right through the center of it. So he threw one in the air and shot. Everybody kind of smiled because they thought, well, sure. He shot off to the side and he didn't hit it. And when he came down, he says, "Oh, I know what you're thinking, that I just deliberately shot to the side of it." So I said, "I'll take a piece of Scotch tape." So he Scotch taped the center of the washer, threw it in the air. Now he says, "Well, one of you gentlemen pick up the washer." So one of the men did. And sure enough, the .22 hole was right in the center of the washer. And next he took a high-powered rifle. He probably used a light bullet run at high speed. And he said, "Now I'll show you how to make coleslaw." So he took a head of cabbage and threw it in the air and shot it. And you know, a light bullet travels at high speed, but hits anything, it explodes. Like cabbage all went to smithereens. Before I go on, I'd like to tell you about my experience with guns. I had my share of cork guns, cap guns, and finally, after much coaxing, I was given a BB gun, an air rifle. I was probably 11 or 12, and I took this air rifle and put a matchstick in the barrel, and I shot my brother in the behind with it. And if you have a younger brother, you know how they were. You just had to look cross at him and they would scream bloody murder. Well, my brother was no exception. He let out a scream that they heard clear to the barn. My mom came a-running, saw me with the air rifle in my hand, my brother rubbing his, and so she grabbed my rifle in her hands and swung with all her might against the pump house door and broke it to pieces, much to my brother's delight. Well, my next gun was a real rifle. It was a .22 caliber, single shot, bolt action, German Gecko. And I'd saved my 25-cent weekly allowances for months to get enough money to buy it. Finally, I got the $5 or $6 needed. I sent to Sears, and when the rifle came, it was a real accurate rifle, a tack driver, if I say in slang. And can you believe it? I took this, my brother and I used to put dandelions in each other's mouth, and we took turns shooting dandelions from each other's mouth with that rifle.
No, it's hard to believe.
Now we'll go on to the history of guns. The first gun, this one that Chet has here, this is Chet Henry. Chet made this display here. Chet's brother Cliff is the one that gave you the map upstairs that we in the Historic Society that we sent away and had fixed up. That come from his brother. They're good neighbors across the river.
These aren't bows, so don't be afraid. This was your first one.
That was the first. This was a hand cannon, and it probably is. Well, in fact, we're pretty sure it came from China, because China was the place where they invented gunpowder. This was from 1326 to the 1500s. And this cannon, this type of gun, the hand cannon, was taking 2 men to fire it. One man loaded and held it, while the other man took the fire here and touched it to the touch hole and shot it off. They loaded with very crude powder and bits of stone and bits of iron and anything that would fit in the barrel. And this, it came to Europe, we figure, through Arabia. And French Huguenots, well, it was used in 2 or 3 wars. It was used in the Battle of Pres in 1346, and by the Germans in 1381. The French Huguenots developed this to probably its highest degree of perfection. They developed one. It probably was a little smaller bore than this. If you figure out the ball it shot weighed 2 ounces, and it was good for 300 yards, which is a long range. And by that time, it probably was a little more like this gun here, because the Chinese, they didn't have pipe. They cast their thing. Might have been cast in bronze, but it had a wooden handle like this with 2 men. Where the French Huguenots, the man put the wooden stick in the ground, and it was used as an artillery piece then. Instead of aiming directly, it was shot like that, as artillery. Yeah, that's how it shot in the air like that. And of course, the touch hole in my pipe here, where you touch it off. This could be shot, really, because my boy took and put a breech in it, so you can put a light load in there and shoot that off. And this was the thing that the man done that shot it. It has a wick in it, and they either shot it with a wick, which was a rope that was soaked in some kind of liquid that would go very slowly, burn slowly, much like the punk that most of us know that we use to light our firecrackers. And the Japanese still use matchlock guns in some of their target practices, and that's how I got this from Dixie Gun Works, who sells this wick that they use in it. And the next gun beyond this was the arquebus, I think they called it. And well, first they made one that they held against their cheek and shot. It wasn't held to your shoulder. And this one I made from an old Springfield stock that I converted. I converted everything to something or other, always cutting them down, because I always wanted something I could shoot. If it didn't shoot, I had to change it, put new barrels on it. I ruined some beautiful guns. Today it'd be worth money, but that's the way I was. I have a falling block that's like a martini action. And it's one beautiful gun. It was liberated from the Germans after the Second World War. You know, Hitler had his men, the troopers, gathered up all the guns from the Germans, and well, they knew where they were. They had them listed first, and then when he come to in power, he took and gathered up all the guns and put them in locked places. And when the Americans came through and liberated them, there was a lot of those guns. And one of my friends over there was an officer, and he brought home several of the guns. And I traded him one of my rifles, or two of my rifles, for a couple of his. Oh, was it? And this Martini action is a beautiful gun. And it was a caliber that you couldn't buy in this country. And so I took and took a lot of trips up in Pennsylvania to Tom McCool in Henryville, who was the gunsmith up there. So he made it into a 22 Hornet, something I could shoot, and took his value away, of course, right then and there. Well, anyway, this was the first one that was they built that was fired by one man from the shoulder. Before that, they fired it from their cheek. I don't know how they took the shock of a gun fired in the cheek, but black powder does not kick like smokeless powder. So I didn't. And I stuck this funnel on the end because when I look at the Pilgrim's guns, they all had bulges on the end. They were blunderbusses. Now, what the idea was, outside maybe you could throw the powder in easier or something, but that's the way the guns were made. And I would say that most of the Pilgrims were using matchlock guns. And wheel locks were invented, but they were very expensive. Maybe Miles Standish had one or somebody like that, but they were probably too expensive. But anyway, this French Huguenots developed this gun to shoot this ball in. And I figured it must have been about a 7/8 inch bore. Now, this is an 1.25 inch pipe I made this one. But 2 ounces would be, see, the amount of a gauge is the amount of balls. That's how we figure gauges. The caliber means a hundredth of an inch. 22 calibers, 22 hundredths of an inch. 50 calibers, a half inch. Well, gauges were how many round balls would go in a pound. You had a 20 gauge, 20 of them took to make a pound. 12 gauge, 12 of them make a pound. So this was a 2 ounce ball they shot. So 2 ounces goes in your 16 ounce pound 8 times. So that, in our way of figuring, would have been an 8 gauge gun, which I would say would be about 7/8 of an inch bore. About this time, about the 1400s, they developed cannons. And the idea of the cannons, they tried to breech load them. Because nobody felt like getting out in front of a cannon and loading it, because you were in full view of the enemy at that time. And so everybody tried to get behind it. So the idea was to, many designs of breech loading. One of the first ones was they built a big wooden frame around the gun, put a tapered breech in it. This is all iron. And loaded your powder and shot in it, and put the breech in, and then they wedged it in with V blocks. Took a sledgehammer and wedged it in. And that was the first attempt, one of the first attempts of breech loading. Now that was the same trouble with our muzzle loading guns, which you'll see later on. That nobody liked to get out there and stand up and pour the powder in and everything. Everybody wanted the breech loading gun because then they could lay behind the stone wall, load that gun, and shoot without being exposed. And when sharps come along, well, that's another story. It was in 1475 and 1550 that this matchlock came along, this man. And it took 1550 to 17, it kept going to 1700. They called it arquebus, and it was improved matchlock. The next gun was the wheel lock, which was too complicated for me to make. I didn't have a broomstick and all the mechanism made. A matchlock, it was a very expensive gun. And you notice these guns were called matchlocks, flint locks, wheel locks, all different kind of locks. And the reason of it, locks, they were made by the locksmiths of those days. They were the best mechanics, machinists, or whatever it was. And so that's the reason they had locks in their name. And this gun worked something like our Zippo lighters. It had a tooth wheel that you wound up with a spring. It had a key that wound up. And when you pulled the trigger, the wheel started revolving. An arm brought a piece of flint down, it contacted the wheel, and the sparks flew in the pan. And the pan is, this is what they call a pan right here. And the pan had a little touch hole, went into the main charge of your gun. And of course, you put a lighter powder in here and a heavier powder in here. The lighter powder to ignite easier. Because the matchlock was a very poor gun in that if it was raining, it was useless. If the wind was blowing, it was useless. And so the flintlock was a great improvement over that because that had a cover. It had to cover that covered the powder and kind of protected it. And they used to have a piece of leather they covered that with. And you pull it out, you had the sparks flew down in the pan, ignited your charge. So I doubt if many Pilgrim Fathers had wheel locks. They were a very expensive gun to build. They probably had one like this and over here. And I know you saw the pictures in the movies, and they always had a big funnel on the end of them, like the funnel I shoved in this one, and I don't know exactly why, unless they were so nervous. They trouble the Indians shooting at them to get the powder and shot in there. But they were called blunderbusses in those days, the guns made like that. And the next gun was our flintlock. And I have a flintlock here. The flintlock was a much improved ignition system. Was cheap to build, reliable. In fact, it's being used today in your primitive hunting. If you hunt in Pennsylvania, you have to use a flintlock. In New Jersey, in our primitive hunting, we were allowed to use a flintlock or percussion. But in fact, the Indians, they had made trade guns to trade with the Indians, and they preferred flintlocks over percussion locks because the white man just kept the percussion caps away from him. His gun was useless. He could always go out and nap himself a new flint with a flint gun. The Germans in Lancaster, and that's where this gun came from. This is made by Robbins in Lancaster. They brought this gun to its highest degree of perfection. They built it special for our colonists. Our colonists were short of lead, so they conserved lead. They made the bore smaller. And if you notice, the British one had a bore 3/4 inch. This bore is a 44 caliber, and they rifled them. They made the barrel longer to get the more speed out of the bullet, and by rifling, the bullet would go in one direction. When they had a smooth bore, you never knew where it was going. I mean, the way it bounced out of the end of the barrel, it might go right or left or straight. They always said that if a man was shot at 100 yards, he was an unlucky man and was shot by like one of the British brown bass. Because in fact, I don't think they used much back sights on them, just a kind of a rough front sight. The flintlock was used from 1660 to 1840. Like, I guess the next thing I'll tell about is the wars that this gun was used in. the 1754 and 59, the French and Indian Wars took place. It was the last war between France and England over the control of North America. George Washington took part in this war. There had been 3 previous battles: King William's War, the Queen Anne's War, and King George's War. By 1775, when the American Revolution started, all were equipped with flintlocks. The colonists used any gun that would shoot. A lot of them were British Brown Bess, 3/4 inch bore. At the start of the war, the colonists, the Continental Congress, formed a committee of safety. Their job was to furnish guns and ammunition for the soldiers. They contacted small shops, any place that could make guns. These guns were unmarked for fear of reprisal if the guns were picked up by the British. When the French came to our aid, we used the 69 caliber of their guns instead of the 75. Both sides used paper tubes with powder and ball. I'll show you that. We have a gun here. Which one it is, Jack? No, that's not the one. It's got a big bore to it. I think it's the one over there. That one. This is that one. Yes. Yeah, this gun, if Chet will hold it the other direction, maybe you can see from where you are. This gun, I'd love to have it hadn't been cannibalized, but my wife went to a sale one time and picked it up for me. And probably very cheap today, quite valuable. But you can see here the piece of brass put in here. It was converted from a flintlock to a percussion. And it has HF marked in here. And so I imagine it was done by Harper's Ferry. And because Harper's Ferry did that kind of conversion, which was known as the Belgium type. There were several types of conversion. But they did the Belgium type, which they drilled a hole in the top of the barrel here, over the powder, and put a crooked hammer on it to reach over and touch off the percussion. They were changed to percussion by the arsenals and sold for $2 or $3 for the hunters, the Americans, the people, the farmers, and other people who needed to go out and shoot game. And so these were turned instead of rifles. Well, they never were a rifle. They were smoothbore muskets, but they made good shotguns. And so that's how they got around the country. And that happened after our Civil War too. I mean, there was a lot of guns converted to use of the civilians.
The original have the sling one?
Yeah, they used to use a sling, and in fact, they had a bayonet too, but I had no bayonet for that one. And the bayonet, the bayonet with Harvey Mauter collection fits the Civil War. We just don't have one that fit the Revolutionary War times. And there were paper cartridges used. They would take a wooden dowel, wrap the paper around it. In the Civil War, they would put glue on the bottom of it and put a piece of muslin or something in and glue that so it wouldn't break loose. And they'd put the powder in the bottom and the shot in and a ball in the top. And they'd bite off the ball and pour the powder in, then push the mini ball down in. Now in the Revolutionary War, they did it exactly the opposite way. They'd bite the powder end off. And the reason they bit the powder end off, they needed some of the powder to put in the pan. In the Revolutionary War, I had percussion caps. We didn't shoot with a pan like that, so it was different. So in the Revolutionary War, They would dump part of the powder in there. They dump the rest in the barrel. And they take and ram the paper and all down the barrel. And the English and their brown bess made their balls a little bit undersized. And by being undersized, they could shoot the paper in, and the paper would help seal the powder going around the edge of the ball. That was our biggest trouble with your muzzle loader, was to seal so the powder wasn't wasted. It would push the ball instead of just going around the out edge of it.
How long did it take after you shot to be ready to shoot again?
I would say that they were pretty good. They could probably shoot maybe 2 shots a minute. Because they didn't take long. They trained well. But you know, well, I might as well tell the story. The rifleman went up to Boston to help them out up there. Their problem was they were slow to load. Because when you had a rifle, after you shot the first time, it was very hard to push a bullet down in it. And so the muzzle loader, which is the smooth bore, was easy to throw it in. So the British said they didn't fear our riflemen too much. Our riflemen did pick off their officers, and they could shoot much farther than these British could. But the British could get off the shots quicker, and then they would rush for their bayonets before the riflemen got a chance. And so George Washington took quite a few of those riflemen, much to their dismay, because they were really good with their rifles. And he converted them to muskets, the smoothbore muskets, because they could load so much quicker. In the War of 1812 and 1814, flintlocks were still being used. This war was over foreign trade. The English would not allow us to unload our cargo, and Americans paid their sailors more than the Britons did, so the British were probably sailors on American ships, along with American sailors, and the British would stop our ships, take off our crews, saying they were all British. It's hard to tell a British from American, so they would we had a lot of trouble with them, so we had this war over. And the Indians had the Indians, the British, the English had the Indians to help them in that war. We didn't have much success in Canada, but we did do good on the water. Admiral Perry did very well on the water. In the South, Andrew Jackson did well. He had his crack Tennessee rifleman with him, and John Lafitte, the pirate, helped him. He furnished a lot of the ammunition and men, guns, to get his pardon. He was supposed to be pardoned after that. In this war, there wasn't any big victory. Everyone decided to call it quits on Christmas Eve, 1814. And I don't know whether you probably noticed Harvey Mauder's pistols there. These are real nice guns that we got from Harvey here. And they were probably purchased about this time. They didn't arrive till 1914, but they were probably ordered ahead to probably get in this war, but they never made it. They probably saw service in our Indian wars. They're a 54 caliber. They shot a round ball, muzzle loaded. And this man North also made dueling pistols at the same time. They were a little smaller bore. They were half-inch bore instead of 54. And they were much finer made. They had gold inlays on them. And everything was made very good because a man's life depended on him, so he built them special. But these were known as horse pistols. The cavalry carried them, and the saddle, and a holster in front of the saddle. They weren't carried by the man himself, but they were pretty heavy. And so when he went into battle, he got close to the enemy, he would tie his sword or saber to his wrist, so he didn't have to draw it. And because he was pretty close quartered when you shot with this, you were on your enemy. So then he would shoot with that, probably drop it, take his saber, and do what work he could with that. In the Civil War, Grant and Lee both carried the same pistol. It was a Colt 36 caliber revolver, and they both were equipped the same kind. The percussion lock. There's several percussion locks here. The one Chet has right here now is a percussion lock. It is equipped with a Maynard primer. This Maynard primer, it took caps. Sharps used it. A lot of people used it. And as you cock the gun, another cap would come over, and there's a knife on there, would cut it off. And instead of using a percussion cap, it was fast, but the soldiers in the Civil War, I understand, a lot of them didn't depend on it. It wasn't quite as reliable as a percussion cap, so they would stick a cap on the nipple instead of this. But it wasn't an idea. Maynard invented it. It works kind of hard, Jack. Yeah, that gun when I got it didn't work at all. Dick Everly fixed it so it worked. Yeah. Well, anyway, this ignition system was discovered by a Scotch clergyman in 1807, who found that by mixing certain chemicals and striking them a sharp blow, they exploded. This was used in different ways. The most popular was a small amount in a small copper cup, set on a nipple, set in the barrel next to the powder. In one shape or another, it's still being used today. You notice these cartridges here, and even I have big shells home. They're all equipped with some sort of a percussion cap. In the muzzle loader, in the first ones, it was rim fire. And then we got center fire. Center fire was an advantage. You could push the cap out and reload it again and again, the same cartridge. Where in a rim fire, which is like our 22 shorts and things today, it was poured in as a liquid and hardened in the bottom, and then you put your powder and shot on top of it, powder and ball. The way we know it best today is cap shot in our 4th of July cap guns. It was in 1820 when our Army switched from flintlocks to percussion ignition. In 1861-65, in our Civil War, the main gun was a .58 caliber muzzle loader, single shot rifle. And we have here Harvey Bowders. It's a Colt. I think it's back here someplace. The one right next to it. Now this one, I think. The next one next to it? What is that one? I think that's it. It'll do anyway. So this is a .58 caliber, and it was rifled. And this gun, a man could. It was deadly at 200 yards. It was so much improved to the other. That's one of the reasons we had so much people killed in the Civil War. Because they were used to fighting like they fought in the Revolutionary War, marching up within 100 yards of each other and then shoot. Well, this gun you could kill a man pretty accurate at 200 yards. It shot a mini ball, which is this is a mini ball. Maybe you can see the hollow in it from here. And the reason for that was most of your rifle guns in those days, like our Kentucky flintlock and those, the ones we used, after you shot the first time or two, it was awful hard to get a bullet in them because the black powder had it corroded the inside of your barrel all up. And, I don't know, made it tight to fit in. So the mini, a Frenchman developed this mini ball, and it was small enough to fit in a rifled musket. And when it exploded, the powder explosion here would force the thin sides out, contact the rifling, and we had an accurate bullet. We find them in the battlefield yet today with wooden in the wooden pegs, and those were usually taken from the Southern. The Confederates used them because the British didn't like us very much, and they'd like to see us defeated in that war. So they helped the Confederates. They sent ships of arms and ammunition to the Confederates, and they used the mini ball with a wooden plug in. And they tell me you still find them some around at the old battlefield with wooden plugs in. Well, a man at Harper's Ferry decided we didn't need the wooden plug, so the Northerners used one like this, without the wooden plug. The force of the powder expanded it. But this made it very accurate. Well, the British ships, quite a few of them were sank, and I do have one home with a wooden plug in. They raised the ship not too long ago, and they found a lot of them in here, but still with the wooden plugs in. And so I do have one home with a wooden plug in. Frenchman developed it. During the Civil War, breech loaders were introduced. One of the early ones was a Hall, made at Harper's Ferry. One of the young workers there was a 19-year-old Christian Sharp. Where was he born? Washington, New Jersey, in 1811. He was a machinist and a rifle maker there. He must start out pretty young. His relation, I cannot figure how it is, was my school teacher, Mary Sharps, in the New Hampton school. Taught at 8th grade in one room, and she was the teacher there. I know she was a relative to Christian, but as much as we look through the history of the books, there's very little known about Christian Sharp's life. And her date just didn't figure out to be his daughter. Yeah, he'd been pretty old. Anyway, Mary and Ike, neither one were married, and they lived in New Hampton. And Ike used to come over, and he used to play the violin. Mom used to play the piano. So I knew Ike and Mary pretty good. But never asked about the family. And those things, again, that you don't do what you should have done. Later, he went to Philadelphia and opened his own shop. He formed a partnership with William Hankins. After the company dissolved, Sharp moved to Vernon, Connecticut, where he experimented with trout breeding. He had others, in between other things too, but this was his last He should have been a rich man because he received $1 royalty on each one of his guns. And one of them, one place I know I read where he sold 80,000 guns to the army, so $80,000 was quite a lot of money in those days. But he must have spent a lot on this artificial breeding of trout. And he died a poor man in 1864 of tuberculosis. His total estate was valued at $341.25. The Sharps 52 breech loading, single shot, nitro paper cartridge had an under lever operating a falling breech block with a sharp top edge. Now I don't have a Sharps here. I'd love to have one. If somebody has lots of money, they can invest in one, donate to. But the gun I have here, Chet, is it's a Ballard. It has a falling block.
Sure, if I hold them up, I'm not really familiar with these.
I know you are. There it is, right there. Hello. Now that's a Ballard. This is quite an odd gun too. Chet opens it up. You can see it has a falling block. See how the block falls down here, exposing the chamber. Anyway, it's marked out. Anyway, this falling block in a Sharps had a sharp edge on the top, and you put a nitro paper cartridge in it. The nitro paper so it would burn up, and as you close it, the sharp edge would cut the back of this paper cartridge off, exposing the powder, and by putting a primer on, you was ready to shoot. And lots of his guns were made with Maynard primer, and he had different types of primers that he invented. And it was the best gun in the Civil War. Yeah, they had hex barrels. Most of the guns in those days used hex barrels. I don't know why. I could tell you how they were made. They had blacksmiths in those days that really knew their business. They would take a piece of flat iron and get it in their forge and get it hot and pound it into a thing and use a mandrel through the center. When it come together, they would do the weld there. Your welding was done with the borax and iron filings, got it the proper heat, and they done welding that was beautiful, the jobs they did. They would shoot that gun. They might have been able to take smokeless powder, but one never blew one apart with black powder. And then they rifled them. The Sharps 52 caliber breech loading single shot nitro paper cartridge had an under lever operating a falling breech block with a sharp top edge. After inserting the paper cartridge, the block was raised. Cutting off the end, exposing the powder, the block was so successful because it sealed the breech so good. I mean, he had the best breech loading gun that was built. Probably working down with Hall. He took his ideas and Paul's ideas, and this breech block sealed. See, most of your trouble in those days was with powder flying back in your face when you pulled the trigger. Then the Sharps were even converted to the use of copper cartridges, because when you drop the block, it was open there, you just put your copper cartridge in, and they were converted, many of them, after the Civil War. at the end of the Civil War that was starting to bring them out. And you just made a hole for your pin to go through to hit the thing, and used a different hammer. You had a breech loading cartridge gun. Besides using the 58 caliber muzzle loader in the Civil War, there were 7-shot Spencers, 52 caliber. The Army bought 94,196 of them. And these were the guns that the Southerners said the Northerners had a gun that they loaded on Sunday and shot all week. And there was also Henry's and Colt repeaters. And Sharp's models 1859 and 1863, they sold 80,512 of the Sharps. And there's Burnside percussion carbine and many other breech-loading guns that was being brought out towards the end of the Civil War. At this time, the Sharps were made by Robbins and Lawrence of Windsor, Vermont. Buffalo Bill Cody got his title by shooting the most buffalo. He used a 50-70 Sharps carbine. And the Sharps heavy target rifles were used by the sports. In those days, they run special trains out west to shoot the buffalo. And the most important rifle in those days to shoot the buffalo was a heavy Sharps target rifle. They were the best rifle built in the country. One of the men from Russia were one of the high officials, and his rifle that he was shot when he went around on the train, they shot the buffalo with, was a Sharps target rifle. See, the government wanted the buffalo shot off. If they could kill the buffalo off, they would take the Indian's food supply, the food supply, his clothing, his tents, but mainly they took his food supply away, kept him on the reservation. So the influence was that everybody would go out and shoot buffalo. And of course, Buffalo Bill had a job to shoot buffalo, because his job was to furnish meat for the railroad crews that were building the railroads through the West. And his horse was so good that without being guided, it would get a bunch of buffalo going in a circle, and he'd shoot them off. And by killing them in the circle, when they come out from the wagons to haul the carcasses in, they didn't have far to go. So they liked the way. And he didn't even use a bridle on that, because I read an article one time where he had competition with some man who was supposed to be a good buffalo hunter. And before the end of the shoot, he was so far ahead that he took the bridle and saddle both off his gun and just let the horse go by itself, and kept on killing buffalo. Gettysburg, July 1st and 3rd of 1836, was a changing point of our Civil War. Up until that time, General Grant thought that God was in him and that he couldn't lose a war, couldn't lose a battle. And after he lost that battle, he took the full blame for the defeat and asked to be replaced. But Jefferson Davis refused to replace him. You probably know more Americans were killed in our Civil War than in all the wars we ever fought put together. One of the biggest skirmishes was at Little Round Top, a high point on the battlefield. If the Confederates could have controlled it, the top of it, they would have split the Northern Army in two, and the outcome probably would have been different in that battle. And their losses were terrific in trying to take it. They were against a small force of Burden's sharpshooters. Colonel Hiram Burden, a mechanical engineer and one of the nation's best rifle marksmen, It formed the core of the best marksmen from the northern states. One time he tried to talk our government into giving him sharps. They wanted him to use Colt repeaters. They just weren't as good. The convincing point was when he wagered he could take a poster with a man's face and shoot his left eye out at 200 yards. And he did it. These hand-picked kite shots were the men at Little Round Top. Many Southerners died in that attempt from burdened sharpshooters. Lead flew so fast and accurate, they thought they were facing a huge army, not 300 men. A good marksman could get off 7 to 10 shots per minute with his sharps. These men stopped the forward movement of 30,000 Southerners. Next comes the Spanish-American War. In the Spanish-American War, we have the 30-40 Pride. Well, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one I did. Show the one that the Harvey Myers collection. That one. No, that's mine.
I think it is.
Yeah, that's the one that's what I made the start for.
Is this Harvey here?
No, one this way. The 30-40 Pride was a good, very good gun. It was used in the Spanish-American War. Chet can show you how the bullets were put in. The only problem was it was slow. You had to put in one at a time in the side in this box. Will you do this? Oh, somebody's box. It was one of the smoothest action bolts that was ever made. Rather your gun magazine said anybody tried to smooth up a Krag wasn't right in his head because it was a very smooth operating bolt. But it was slow to operate. You opened up the thing and you put 5 cartridges in, but you put them in one at a time. The one big advantage with this was for a hunting rifle is that you could keep a live shell if you was hunting dangerous game in the chamber and add more cartridges to it. Like with the Springfield, you had to pull a bolt down to shove more cartridges in. So you was had an empty gun in the Springfield. Where this you keep a live one in there and add more to it. It was a rimmed case. It was the last one of our guns used a rimmed case. It was center fire, but had a rim on it. I think the reason, I'm not positive, but I think the reason we went away from rimmed cases, that the rimless case worked much better in automatic fire. And so when we brought out the machine guns and things, we needed a rimless case. One of the early ones with the 45 pistol, that was a rimless case. 3006 was rimless. I don't know how far I went. I get all twisted up. I guess the Spanish-American War took place between April and December 1898. Our war was with Spain, fighting to give Cuba its independence. Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders saw service in Cuba. Admiral Dewey annihilated the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay without losing a man. That was a saying, I remember. Won the mighty battle without losing a man. Our war casualties were small. We lost most of our men from tropical disease, especially in Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Malaria was prevalent. This pushed our doctors to develop a vaccine, which was used in the men while building the Panama Canal. Probably saved many, many lives there. At the war's end, Cuba was independent, and we paid Spain $20 million for Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. And we used the bolt action Krag, and this, I showed the one here. because of the need for a machete type, and this was, I think, Teddy Roosevelt when he had the experience in the Philippines, because maybe you've read that we used a .38 revolver, and in the Philippines you hit the fanatics down there, you shot them there, then it's .38, and they kept right on with a knife and killed the American soldiers with their knives, even shot clear through. And so that's about the time we come out with a .45 automatic with heavy enough lead and big enough bullet that you're supposed to knock a man down. And in the tropics, using this type of bayonet up to that time, it wasn't much good cutting your way through the dense forest or undergrowth. And so the first thing Teddy Roosevelt did when he became president was make a knife-type bayonet. There's probably one here. There's one, check. This one? Yeah, that one. And that would serve double purpose. It could be used to cut lead, it could be was used fit on the front of the Krag, or fit on the front of the Springfield. I guess you dug holes with it if you tried to hide. Yeah, fit on the belt, and fit on the gun. Your barrel went through here, and just snapped on your under part of your gun to hold it in place. And this gun, the next gun they used was our Springfield. In 1902, we adopted a German Mauser, a bolt action. That's way out. That's our Springfield. Chet's used this. We first went to the service. That's the old Springfield. Now, and this was a little easier to feed.
It's over by the gun.
Over by the gun, is it?
Over by the gun.
See, that's one of the reasons we went away from the fact of slow to feed. With this, you just took your 5 cartridges, opened up the gun, and slammed the whole thing right down in the reservoir. And they made another thing on this one that was very good. A man in battle, well, he'd be lost. What they did on this gun, when you has a safety on the side, when you move that safety in one position, when you pull the bolt back, it would the last cartridge shot would stay open, and otherwise you might keep on working there and bang, bang, banging around. You wouldn't know whether you were shooting or not shooting. Well, this it locked itself open until you put more cartridges in it, and then so when we sporterized these, we pushed down on this and grind the back end off a little bit, so then we could close it after sporterized it. That was 5 shots, and it was fairly quick to load. Wars bring a great advancement in arms. It seems that after our Civil War, we had the most changes. We went from muzzle loading to breech loading, rim fire to center fire. See, a center fire cartridge, you can just push the primer out, put a new primer in, and reload it over and over and over again. Where with a rim fire, you were stuck because of that explosive was poured in as a liquid, not a hardened, and you had no way in the field to do to use that. Single shot to repeaters, and even automatics at that time. And black powder to smokeless powder. Your smokeless powder was more powerful, and it wasn't near as dirty then. You still had to clean your guns after the war because our government said we used corrosive primers. Sporting guns, we didn't use corrosive primers. But I think they figured that corrosive primers was a little more reliable. And so the soldiers had to clean their guns more often because it would corrode if you didn't actually shot. And it went from a bullet, went to a smaller bullet, probably much faster. In the 1890s, all the leading countries went to smaller calibers, 30 caliber and 8 caliber. The British and American, they went to a 30 caliber. The Germans went to an 8 caliber, or 8 millimeter rather. And 8 millimeter is approximately 4/100ths to the inch, so it's about a 32 caliber. In World War II and World War I, we used the same 30 caliber cartridge. In the Second World War, they were using automatic loading with the Garand. We have one here from Kevin. And the big advantage of that was it helped. Yeah, that big heavy thing. That's man had to be strong to carry that. And that was fed. There's a clip back there too, Ted. That was fed by a clip of 8. And you push the whole. You didn't push the cartridge out. You push the whole clip in. Yeah. And some of the men tell me that they had bad fingers from it too. Because when you push the last one in, the bolt flew shut. And your finger wasn't out of the way, you had a sore finger. The same cartridge is used in machine in both wars, and also the 30 caliber, the same cartridge was used in our machine gun. This is part of a machine gun belt. And every so often these, I have quite a lot of belt of it. Every so often you'll find one with a black nose or red nose, I still recall it anyway. And they were tracers, so to see where you were shooting. And of course, the other machine gun they used was the 50 caliber, which I don't know. Kevin tells me that John Wayne had one that a single shot that he shot at tanks with one. Of course, John Wayne was a big man. maybe so. And a single shot shooting a 50 caliber. They were ½ inch. They use them from airplanes and machine guns. In the Vietnam War, we used mostly fully automatic guns. Desert Storm was truly a Star War. You didn't see who or what you were shooting at, just like a burp on a screen. I would like to go over a collection once more because I didn't show all of Harvey's guns. First, the two of Harvey's pistols here are they're beauties. They were 54 caliber horse pistols. Flintlocks. Here you can see the difference in the pan on these where they had the cover on them. That's what the wheel lock didn't have. The weather got in it. And with a cover on, you put fine powder in here. You usually had 2 horns. You had a small horn. Would had fine powder on. You put that in there, Then you use the coarser powder in your barrel, in the ball. Close your pan, and this has a little bit of marks on it, grooves. This is your flint, and the sparks flew down, ignited your priming powder. Your priming powder went through the little touch hole, just a real small hole, and set off your main charge. That's same type was used in a lot of our, most of our guns. Here used the little touch hole. Some of them you had to ignite. In the guns sometimes like this, they were shot with hot iron instead of using a burning rope like that. They'd get a red hot iron and push down in the touch holes and set them off. Now Harvey has other guns here. They were sporting guns. There's a he has a shotgun there, doesn't he? Yeah, double barrel shotgun. Yeah. Now there's a nice gun. That's a greener. That's made in England. It's one of the finer guns they made. They made a Purdy that was a little different class. I got to push it over to the side. But the greener was in the class like an L.C. Smith, we call it in this country. And probably Damascus, isn't it? Yeah. That's the Damascus barrel. So it was only shot with black powder. They didn't use smokeless powder in those. I mean, I have a Remington Damascus home that I have shot smokeless powder in, but I made sure it was very light loads with a low brass, never the high brass shotgun shells. 3 grams or less of powder in it. And it's been perfectly safe to shoot. But there has been pictures. You go around the gun places sometimes, you'll see they have a gun with a Damascus barrel hanging up. It says, "Don't do this." And somebody shot a high-powered load in it, and it blew the side right out. These guns are made by blacksmiths again with wrapping of thin piece of steel around and a blacksmith weld. They put them around a mandrel, and if you look real close, you can see all the little turns in this gun. And the later ones made of fluid steel were strong, you should eat them. But these were made for black powder. And then the other gun he has here, not an army gun, is I guess that's it, no? It's the one with the, yes, that one. Now that's a sporting good gun. Yeah, that's a rifle. This is made by Griffin Lawrence, I think. Anyway, see, this gun is in the back with a spring. This is called back action. Most of them in the forward part here. But put it in the back. The gun could be a little shorter and have a longer barrel. And put it in the back, made a little neater gun. But these were expensive guns. And you notice this has a set trigger on it too. It has 2 triggers. That's a real nice sporting gun there. You set the back one and then just touch the front one. Very light touch and it go off. That's a fine gun that Harvey gave. And then there is another one here, a muzzle loading shotgun, I think too. No, that's the one I converted. I didn't convert it. Somebody else cannibalized it. That's a Revolutionary War gun. I thought there was another shotgun. Maybe not. I have one of the shotguns home, but I didn't bring it with. One went through the, somebody else gave it to the association. I cleaned it up. It was in pretty sad shape. But that shotgun had beautiful carving on it. I just don't know who gave it to the association, but it's a beautiful gun. I would say it was made in Germany or Switzerland, where the people have done beautiful wood carving. It has a stag head on it, and it's a beautiful piece of gun. I took some linseed oil and turpentine, done a lot of rubbing on it. Now I got it looking pretty decent. It was pretty sad shape. But I felt that we didn't need that gun. We had enough guns to show. I think we've got all the guns here. Now, this Chet built here, this is built some of his cherry wood up there. And when you get time, come up and take a look at it. Chet was working in one of the Roseberry's homes up, not Matilda's, but he came across these little boxes. And Matilda didn't know what it was, or not Matilda, Mrs. Roseberry. And then anyway, that section, combustible cartridges. There's a little wire, if you can see it, sticking out there. So Chet went over one day, he said, here's a couple of boxes of cartridges. You want to see what's in them? I said, the only way we can do is pull a wire. So we pulled the wire. We didn't know what was going to happen, explode or what. And anyway, we did it. So inside we found.
What happened?
We found this.
No, nothing.
They were paper cartridges wrapped. The powder and the ball was in it. And just 6 of them was in there, just enough to fill the cartridge. So I wrote to the Colt company to ask them if they would explain to me. Well, we didn't get much of an explanation from Colt, but they did answer my letter. And they said they had no records of them outside of, they were made by the Hazard Powder Company, which was out of business up in Connecticut. But these cartridges were made to fit this old Colt. This is a 49, 31 caliber Colt, which was their 31 caliber, I think, and they were made to fit this. I don't know where I picked up this, but this is the type of gun that our Pony Express people used. They used a little longer barrel than this, I think, but this was a light-built Colt, and everything the Pony Express people, boys, had, had to be light, because the only way to keep away the Indians and the highwaymen was speed. And so they used this. This was the type of gun they used, a 49 caliber Colt pocket pistol. This was percussion, of course. And this is a shot pouch. You put in there, yeah. And this stopped anymore coming in the proper amount here. If you want an 1.25 inch shot in your gun, you put it here. 1 inch or an ounce and a half, put in this hole. So that controlled the amount of shot went into your shotgun. And this is a powder horn. And of course you never poured the powder directly into your muzzle loading gun, because there still might be a spark in the bottom of it, and if you use your horn, the whole thing would blow up in your hand and you lose your arm. So they used the right amount of measure. In our Civil War gun, the right amount was 60 grains of powder. In the muzzleloader gun that I shoot home for hunting, I use 80 grains of powder in that. Anyway, you pour the powder in your measuring thing, and then pour it into your muzzle-loading gun. Now these are the different size balls. This is what the British use in their brown vest. That's 75 caliber, which is 3/4 of an inch. This is 69 caliber, which is not the French. And of course, when there were several outfits that went to help George Washington without pay. There were really patriotic people in those days. Without pay, there was a bunch of Pennsylvania Germans. There were real good riflemen that formed a corps, and they tell me they dog-trotted all the way to Boston. And we had a man, Morgan, from New Hampton, who went down to Virginia and got a bunch of riflemen there together. And they went, I think they took them a week, but they never lost a man going to Boston. And said when George Washington saw his Virginia men there, he cried and kissed every one of them. Well, anyway, the riflemen in those days, in their Pennsylvania rifle, shot approximately that, which is 40 caliber, 42 caliber. This was the mini ball that we all shot. This is a 54 caliber. This is the one that we could use in this pistol, 54 caliber. And this is a Sharps. The Sharps were shooting a 52 caliber. In fact, several of the breech loaders shot 52 caliber. And that's a 52 caliber. And there's some of the little primers here that they use on, like we use on that pistol. See, these were the balls, the 69 caliber balls. Chet also explained them here. So when you come up after a while, you can look at that. You can look at these bullets too. This is the evolution of the cartridge. First, this is a musket cap. It looked like a derby. And then this is what they call the BB caps. The real small CB caps, the 22 shorts, the long rifles. Now these are all being rim fired today. We never went away from rim fire. And this first one here, I would say, is the first thing that was ever shot. Because somebody was smart enough to stick a BB in the end of one on a cap and found out it would shoot. And so in those days, they did a lot of indoor target shooting. In Germany, in this country, and they had what they call parlor shooting. The women were probably knitting in one room, and the men were down in the other room shooting target. And so 22 shorts here actually was our first cartridge we had. Smith & Wesson was pretty sharp. They took and saw it coming, saw the cartridges coming, and so they bored all the way through their chamber that when it revolved, the revolver, to put their both in. Colt came along, and he was very busy making his percussion gun. And when he come to find out, he had to wait 7 years till the patents run out before he could bore clear through. Now Sharps had a little different idea. He got around the patent. Sharps pistols. He sold a lot of pistols. Sharps did. In later years, he went away from rifles and went more to shooting, building of pistols. And his pistols had several barrels. And so he said, we got a bored barrel, not a bored cylinder. So he got around Smith & Wesson's patents that way. Well, this is, I don't have much rim fire to show you, because there was a lot of rim fires used in rifles, but much bigger than that. This is a 38 rim fire. This is a 38 center fire. This is a 45 automatic. This is the one they developed so they could knock a man down. And the only reason I'm showing this 30-30 in mine, thank you, Annie. The only reason I'm showing this, maybe you can see the green on it here. And that comes from being in my cartridge belt. It turned all ring. Well, that's what happens. His 45-70 is what Custer used at his last stand. He had trapdoor Springfields. And the soldiers decided they didn't want to carry that box around. They wanted to look more like the cowboys, have the belt with the cartridges in it. Well, the cartridge did the same thing I did here. Well, they found a lot of men dead of the soldiers, and with cartridges part way out of their gun, their knives broke. They never got only the one shot off, but the cartridge stuck in their gun teeth. That's stuff on there. See, that's the idea of copper. Copper seals the back end of the gun. There's a lot of designs of breech-loading guns, but the designs never worked out because they didn't use a soft material. They tried to make them with iron, and they wouldn't expand and fill up the chamber. Where copper expands and fills the chamber up, and the pressure has to go forward then. And that was, so they couldn't get this blown out because it was tight. And some of them was bone spirit or so-and-so. But that was just because they liked the looks of them. But this 45-70, now this is a 30-40 Krag. You can see the rim on it. And then he went away from that to the 30-06. This is the British. Now the British had a rim case in. Now when the British went away from rim cases, I don't know now. But the German was rimless and the American was rimless. Theirs was 32 caliber. Ours was 30. This is a 50 caliber machine gun bullet. This is a little carbine that we used in World War II, the Vietnam War II. And this is not what it looks like. It's one of mine. I didn't have any of them because we went down to 22 caliber in a lot of our guns today. And I didn't have the Remington 22 that they used. So this is had to be hand loaded when I made the gun for it. Now you can buy it commercially. 22 Varminter they call it. And this is what a shotgun primer looks like. See, it's quite long. It's a much bigger primer. And this is the primer used for a small rifle. And of course this is the flint we use in the flintlock. Well, it says that's all. Pardon me? I tell you, without my wife, I wouldn't know what.
That's a pretty good little story.
Okay, honey.
And then we'll have our lunch.
And then are we going to eat or eat first?
I better eat first, and then you would like to introduce Mr. Strzelecki
Now or after?
after our lunch. Okay.
Well, these two cannonballs were found very close to where I live. Harvey Mauder told me about how he happened to find them. Harvey knew that during the Civil War, at the top of Broad Street Hill, looking down over our valley, was a battery of cannons. And Harvey said, figured out, now they had to do some shooting once in a while. What would they shoot at? And down on the road across from the Dairy Queen, it's called the Springtown Road, there's a little knob down there. I don't know whether it was an old lime kiln or whether it was just a stone heap. Anyway, there's a knob there. So Harvey said, well, that's where they would shoot. They would shoot at. So he went down, and he kicked around there, and he found these two cannons. There's probably more of them down there, probably if you take your little Geiger counter and go down there. Now these I don't know where come from. They was fired from a pretty good sized cannon. Well, thanks for your attention.
Well, thank you very much. We will have our lunch, and then we will be entertained by Mr. Donald Sterlicki, whom Belva will introduce.
If it isn't set up, does he have time before?
Anybody's welcome to come up and look.
Okay.
You think he'd have time?
Yeah, okay, all right, yes. Would you like to introduce him, please?
I'd like to introduce Mr. Stolacki. He's an accomplished pianist and he's organist with
Zion United Church of Christ,
and he's a librarian at Voorhees, Woodland. And he's also mayor of Washington, and he will be leaving right afterwards because he's going to officiate at a wedding this afternoon.
Okay.
And he'll play for us a medley of patriotic songs which we thought went fine with the guns and our history of our country.
Okay. The piano's in there, and we can hear it. Thank you.
I didn't know that. I read it. I could have some grade. How they did. 6th graders.